Hey everyone, Tactics here, bringing you another Mythic Vault of the Incarnates raid guide, this time diving into Kurog Grimtotem, one of the tighter throughput checks that currently exists in the raid. In this video, I'll be going over our general strategy for this boss, giving you tips for each elemental phase and the two intermissions. In particular, I'll be showing some small, minute tank movements, which are extremely important and will make this boss not only more consistent, but also just way easier for the rest of your raid to deal with when it comes to some of the scarier overlaps. Now, let's get into the fight, and we're going to talk about this chronologically here. So starting off at the beginning, you'll be going into the fire phase, and this is going to be in this phase for almost the entire first phase. So something to note is that the pulsing damage in this boss fight will ramp up here. So we do have a weak aura, which I'll link in the description, that shows the next tick, when it's going to happen, and what the previous hit did. This ramps up over the phase, and because you're sitting in one zone for a very long time, this gets very hard by the end of these phases. So you want to make sure that you actually have your raid cooldowns staggered at the end of these phases, not using them at the beginning. See, as well, this actually also leads to you kind of milking time in the intermissions to make those kind of stretch out and last longer, so that you can regen your cooldowns to be available again for the end of the next phase that you're in. So anyways, moving into the fire zone here, we tank near the edge here. This spawns, of course, the mythic only ad, and what this guy does is every single mythic ad has a frontal cone attack. This one is the easiest to deal with by far, just kind of an initial hit on the tank with some swirlies that spawn everywhere. And then on top of that, this ad will also occasionally spawn some puddles underneath ranged players, which you'll see in a little bit here. And these puddles here will eventually, as you can see right there, turn into soaks. And what these soaks do is, if they aren't soaked within 15 seconds, they'll spawn an ad. So the way we handled this is, for the first and fourth set of these soaks, we actually had the tank not actively tanking Kurog do this. So you see the Sundering Strike's going to go out. I'm currently taking the ad, so I'm going to taunt the Sundering Strike off. The soaks just spawn there, this big animation. So now they're soaks. See the orbs showing, and immediately the other tank jumps into those soaks to eat them. So he'll do that the first set of soaks and the fourth set of soaks. For the middle two sets of soaks, we have immunities. So we have a rogue with cloak and a rogue with cloak, because we have two rogues. But you could use any form of immunities. I've seen mages do it, that kind of thing. So something big, some immunity to soak those two sets. And basically we have these markers showing where the range are going to stack, and that's basically where the soaks are going to spawn. So the range stack starts here, then they move to triangle when the first set of soaks spawns, then they move from triangle to diamond when the second set spawns, diamond to skull when the final set spawns, etc. And then all those get soaked by their respective soakers, and then we don't get killed by any ads. Now in terms of the tank swap, as we saw there, Kurog is just a one stack tank swap. The ads in this and all of these phases actually don't have any tank swap associated with them, so we just tended to do a swap at the same time we're swapping Kurog. But otherwise, it's not really a big deal. There is one moment where we don't do that, and I'll mention that. But then we get to the dance here, basically handled exactly the same way as Council, the recital from Castle Nathria, if you're familiar. So as you can see here, the debuffed players, we have a weak aura for this, I can link that as well. Debuffed players run to the right here, staggering all their puddles around. As you can see, melee can actually run in such a way that they still have boss uptime if they run around and then down the side here. And then everyone else just takes a couple steps over to, I guess for them it's the left. I'm the tank, so it's a little reverse here, so sorry. But they're stepping to the left a little bit, and they just have no swirlies under them. Note you can actually like pause for a bit here, because it takes quite a bit of time for that initial detonation to land. So you can actually put a bunch of puddles on top of each other before everyone starts moving, or at least the debuff player starts moving. So keep in mind, and you're really trying here not to lead anyone too much. You don't ever want to cut anyone off. And then note, because of how they're running, our frontals are always going to be faced towards this edge here, down this way, as you can see that we're doing right now, because we don't want to turn it too far and hit the people that just avoided, but we also want these people that do have the debuff to be able to still have boss uptime and also not be clipped by the frontals. So pointing these like down into the corner area is very good to like keep everyone safe. Now, the other thing to note about these, the Flame Rot ad here in this phase is that you don't actually want to kind of hard focus this ad. You really want to kill this ad kind of just as it's enraging or even just after it enrages, just because you want as much boss damage as you physically can get. And obviously for some classes, some specs, you get additional single target damage by having this ad to cleave off of. Very, very good. So for us, I believe we had literally a single DPSer cleaving off of the Flame Rot Eradicator, where everyone else was just cleaving off of the boss himself. And then we would swap to the ad if we needed to kill it when it was getting close to the enrage and it still had health. So again, prioritizing boss damage here, because like I mentioned, this is a very, very tight check. At the end of this first phase, you'll be aiming to get Kurog down to around 60% HP. Anything less than that, and you have made your life later on easier. Anything too higher than that, and you have to make that up later on in the fight, right? So the lower you get this boss in this first phase, the better it is. And as you can see now is when we start staggering our cooldowns, because the ticks are getting pretty high, as you can tell. Here's our second dance. Actually, I missed this. So that's the fourth soak here. Let me rewind actually and show you the second and third soak. Here they are. They happen at the same time, and that's why the two rogues kind of are going out. Not the same time, but like very close together. They're cloaking, they're soaking, and then they're coming back in. And then we're getting to, here we are, the chaining of the CDs. As you can see, actually I'm targeting Kurog, can't really see the ad here. But this dance is where the ad is going to start enraging. You might see it barely enrage. It's going to start casting, and then it's going to enrage. We killed it just before it enraged. So this was actually, we were a little fast killing this ad. You could milk it another few seconds there. It's not the end of the world regardless, but there is a few more seconds of leeway there than we had. So like sometimes we did have our tank either popping like a big defensive here as it enraged and eating a couple melee ticks. We found that to be better than having the tank kind of leap away and kite this specific ad, just because we do want to milk as much boss damage as possible. So be aware that that is a possibility depending on your ad DPS, but it is livable to come through a few auto attacks. So just pop a big CD to get through that. And then we come to a very, very important thing for consistency on this boss fight in terms of the ads you're spawning in this first intermission. Now, if you had stayed in this zone, this fire zone, for the entire 30 additional buff ticks, so this would fire debuff would be at 31 if you had done that, then you would have your fire ad, and then because all three of these stacks are the same, you would get a random one of these three. We do not want that. We specifically, for consistency's sake, want to make sure that we get the lightning ad. However, one problem is, of course, on mythic difficulty, if you ever shift zones, the boss will start casting a summon of an ad. Now, there is kind of a cheeky little way around that here, where if you move the boss here at exactly 97 energy, the instant the boss ticks 97 energy, you cross him across the threshold to the lightning zone, he'll begin to cast the lightning ad spawn. He'll get one single tick of the lightning zone, but then he will phase into the intermission before he actually spawns that mythic lightning ad, which means that you avoided getting that ad and you've guaranteed that your intermission ads are lightning and fire. So as you see here, we inch towards the edge here, and once the boss energy hits 97, the instant it hits 97, tank moves, crosses into the lightning zone. You can see here, he's going to start casting to spawn the ad, but he interrupts himself. And as you can see here, not highlighted because he's out of range, he got a second stack of the lightning debuff, because those are now his two highest stack debuffs, lightning and fire, guaranteed lightning and fire ads spawn. So that's the trick here. The minute the boss hits 97 energy, cross over immediately. This might take a few pulls for your tanks to get down, but once you do, it is extremely, extremely valuable for the overall consistency of your pulls on Kurog. So now we have, of course, the lightning ad and the fire ad. In this phase, you will be hard focusing the lightning ad here in terms of his abilities. The lethal currents, like the big one. So what you can see here is lethal current will always first cast Stormbreak. Stormbreak always targets a healer, always. So it'll always jump to a random healer after Stormbreak, and then it'll cast lethal current, which always picks the closest person to the ad. So you can see here, lethal current, it's going to jump to Coder here. And then I'm going to step immediately under this ad to bait the lethal current on me. And this way you can actually always force this lethal current to be on your Thundering Ravager tank, or whoever you want to put it on. So like people don't have to spend DPS time running out or whatever. This was less of a big deal at this point because we were holding DPS in the intermission, but it's just something you can do. The tank's not really in danger. It's not a big deal to lose tank uptime on these ads. So that's something you can kind of game a little bit to always make sure that someone tanky is getting this and they're able to get out effectively, and then they know exactly who's going to get this debuff on them. So always on healers. Healers, you want to make sure you're moving together with the group here, and then whoever you have assigned to this, if you want to assign anyone to this, it's probably not a big deal if you don't, but makes life a little easier. Make sure they run in under the ad. Everyone else moves away from being under the ad, because obviously if you're also crowding the ad wherever it jumps, there's a chance you get to it. You get this debuff as well just because you're the closest. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, the big thing here is movements for the dance, because of course the Searing Carnage does still happen here. So initially we start out here at the edge, and we're moving towards the center of this room with the first Searing Carnage, because we have a bunch of soaks coming in about 10 seconds here. And these soaks, we prioritize having a ranged DPS get in, so they'll come out in a few seconds here. We're clustered around, I believe one of the soaks will be right here, 2 of them even. So melee can get these 2, but then usually we have all ranged DPS out here soaking these. And this leads into another Searing Carnage, which is kind of like the more, I guess, YOLO one. You're trying to make sure that you aren't getting clipped by anything here. And notice again, these puddles are permanent. So the big thing you want to note with baiting these puddles, which go on players, of course, is that you never want to put these puddles in the frost zone or the earth zone. You always want to stick them in either the fire zone, because you're never going back to the fire zone, or the lightning zone, because again, you're never going to the lightning zone ever again. You barely went into it at all during this boss fight, but you really want to make sure that these puddles, which last for the rest of the fight, are not blocking off your future room. So otherwise here, the next dance, we're going to move down into the lightning area, as you can see here, moving. And this is where you might actually call for like a stop DPS, because we're milking our cooldowns, right? And we want our cooldowns to be up for the end of the earth phase, because again, we're going to need to chain all of our CDs together. And so what ends up happening here is we end up waiting for the next Searing Carnage to come out, and that's when this ad actually enrages. You see it's at 91 already. It'll enrage during the Searing Carnage, and the tank will just kite away while everyone does the Searing Carnage and then kills the ad, just to milk as much time as possible. In the meantime, while you are milking, you see a lot of people swapping to these Hellions here. These guys, they're just a kick. You want to get just random damage, and otherwise, you can CC them fully, just nuke them down. When you have to stop on the Blazing Fiend, good thing to do, just swap to all these Hellions, try and get kicks, grips, all those kind of things to bring them in. And here's that kite I'm talking about. The tank's gone, right? Tank's over here. This ad is enraged, slowly moving, and we're just going to kill it. And now we get to another tank moment here where timing can really help you out. So we're going to be going into the earth phase here. And the big thing you want to do is you want to pull this boss across this phase into the earth phase. For me anyways, was for when the Sundering Strike timer was between 4 and 5 seconds. So you see here, I'm going to pull the boss over. And as soon as this kind of takes 5, I walk the boss over. So he comes over between 4 and 5 seconds. Then he'll immediately Sundering Strike me. What this does is it actually desyncs the boss's cast from the ad's cast, which wasn't terribly relevant in the fire phase. I actually don't really want to desync it at all. But for the earth and the frost phases, it's extremely valuable to desync it, because it comes with dodging when both the boss and the ads are casting. And the second one in particular in both of those phases is a very nasty overlap. So doing this forces the boss to Sundering Strike you before he spawns the ad, giving you several extra seconds to actually dodge, and it makes it significantly easier. And I'll cover that actually when this overlap comes, but you definitely want to try and pull this boss across at that timing. If he spawns the ad first, then you missed it. If he Sundering Strikes you, then you got it. Now, in terms of this ad itself, again, has a frontal, like I mentioned, but this frontal is actually probably the scariest one for tanks in the entire fight, because it also has a pretty significant healing absorb attached to it. So definitely for this one, you'll be wanting to try and personal, if you have it, every single one of these frontals. And then the overlap, like I mentioned, is this erupting bedrock cast. So this one is very delayed. This first one's much easier, just because of how many extra seconds you got. But in general, it's already not too difficult. It's really the second one that's the scarier overlap that you do that little delay for. So this one, just pull the boss out so melee can still have uptime. Then you just dodge in. For these ad spawns, big thing here, just make sure you have all of your misdirects going out when these spawn. Tricks, MD, all those things. Just to make sure that these ads aren't actually just going to go and melee a random healer or something like that. Make sure they're getting MD'd to your tanks. And then you're going to get to the actual overlap I'm talking about in about 15 seconds here. So if you didn't get the actual timing right, so they spawn the ad before the Sundering Strike, you'll need to pull this ad way out just to have this overlap be less bad, because it'll be like almost at the same time. Doing that gave us basically an extra like 5 seconds between these casts. Not an extra 5 seconds, but close to about 5 seconds between these casts. You have a decent amount of time, so I can move only a little bit, but you would only move this far if you actually got the delay. So you have plenty of time right now. If you didn't get the delay and the ad spawn first, you need to go like over to here just to make this way safer. Because imagine this overlap coming like 4 seconds earlier, 5 seconds earlier, right? It'd be very dangerous. But because we are able to actually get the delay, and then we pull this ad a little bit away to make life easier, it's very easy to dodge. Let me rewind again and actually show you the full thing. So the Quake starts to come out. 2 seconds. As soon as it starts coming out, that's when I start moving this little ad just a little bit away. So we still want to be able to cleave it and that kind of thing and have decent uptime, so we don't move it too far. And then we move back to the boss, and the ad starts spawning. Stay away from its circle. Then you move into the ad circle. And the boss finishes channeling, but he does his little sundering, and then you're safe here. The one thing to note, again, this is the one time where we have a tank kind of take back-to-back frontals here on the ad itself, just because immediately out of this bedrock, the ad takes 2 steps in frontals. So otherwise, like if this is on this tank, it's going to be facing the raid a little bit. So we just have the one ad tank, which in this case is me, take back-to-back frontals on the ad, and then I'll go in and taunt Kurog. We didn't take any double ups of the sundering. Notice that the other tank's just holding Kurog for a few extra seconds after eating a sundering, but we never double up the sundering because, of course, that debuff is very nasty, and this doesn't actually leave a debuff on the tank. It's just a healing absorb. So be aware of that. And then we're, of course, getting to the end of this phase where we are just chaining all of our CDs, right? We've got the rallies going out. We're going to see Darkness. I think you saw Spirit Link already. You'll see like AMZs going out, Darkness, like all these things. This is also definitely for sure the most dangerous part of the fight, because in the Earth Zone you have those healing absorbs, which are, you know, turned up to 11 on Mythic. So you really want to make sure, you know, you're chaining CDs, personal usage, health pots, health stones if needed, because this is the most dangerous part of the fight, the end of the Earth phase. So be sure you're using everything here, and that's also why you're kind of delaying the intermission one a little bit, because you want to make sure you have everything back for this part of the fight, because it's exceptionally dangerous. In terms of boss health here, 30% is your goal by the end of the Earth phase. So again, anything below 30% is a bonus. Anything above 30% you have to make up in the final Ice phase. In terms of killing the big ad here, you can see he's up. He's about to enrage. He is enraged, actually. You want to kill him during this erupting bedrock. He's not autoing the tank during this time, so it's not a big deal that he's enraged. And you kill him during that enrage, so you're all good. So that's the timing in terms of killing that Earth ad in this Earth phase during that third bedrock. And then you go to the second intermission here, where because you've already used the lightning and the fire ads, no matter what here, you will get a frost ad, even though you only have the single frost stack. And of course, you will get the earth ad because that's 31 stacks. So you guaranteed always get these ads, assuming you've done that first thing correctly, which is why that doing that first cross into the lightning zone is so important. It fixes your intermissions for the rest of the fight. Here you just want to keep the frost ad kick, just has a kick, and then otherwise you want to be focused on soaks for this frost ad. So he'll put out 2 soaks at a time, and in this intermission you're aiming to only get 2 sets of those soaks, and what these do basically is, you know, it's split damage, and you can only ever soak 1 of these out of the 2. And so what we end up doing is we put tanks into one of them, and we put rogues cloaking into the other one of them. And alongside this, we make sure that we put an external on each of the actual debuffed players so they don't also die to this very first one. Everyone else wants to make sure they are not in these circles, because they're all going to be soaking the next set of circles. So that's why this is a very low amount of soakers. Know that if you do have an immunity on the actual person, we don't in this case, it's a monk and a priest, so they can't immunity it, but they could just run out and immunity it if they had one. So we're going to do the tanks in one with an external on the priest, and the rogues cloaking in the other with an external on the monk. Otherwise, then this freezing tempest comes out, and everyone just needs to stack inside of that. For the next soak, we're going to put all the melee in one, and then all the ranged in the other. And very important note, as I mentioned, if you, for whatever reason, were accidentally in the first one, you got clipped by it, whatever, do not go into the second one. because this debuff will absolutely ruin your day. And of course, tanks and rogues that were in the first one don't go into the second one. Now, something to note for the Crusher here is there is an overlap with these the ground shatters going out during this Freezing Tempest where everyone wants to be stacked. Something to note about these circles is that they will go on the 3 closest players to the Earth Ad. So as you can see here, if you rewind just a couple seconds, we pull the boss down a little bit, and we have the 2 tanks standing like right under the Earth guy to guarantee that the tanks are getting it, and then we have one of the tankier melee DPS getting it as well. And so for this, it's not a big deal for tanks, but particularly for the DPS, what you want to do is you want to wait until there's about like a second and a half left on your bomb timer. Stay in here, stay in here, stay in here, and then start leaving. Drop your bomb, and then come back into the center, because there's a lot of damage going out in that portion of the fight. So you really want to make sure, especially as the non-tank player, whoever gets that you have something available, because it's a ton of damage going out there. Really, really good idea to make your tanks bait that, though. Much more important than baiting the lightning debuff in the first intermission, in my opinion, especially during that specific overlap, because it is just so scary for non-tank players. We got the second set of soaks here. Like I mentioned, all the range are getting this one, all the melee are getting in that one. Split the damage easily. Ads are spawning, making sure that you are MDing those to your tanks. Again, we're going to kill the frozen ad here, makes her life a lot easier. And then we have the earth guy, which again, we're going to be milking for a decent amount of time here. We're just kind of chilling, taking the bombs out. The big thing for these puddles is that these will disappear on the next phase, so you're not really concerned about where you place them, as long as you do have room to kind of run up towards this way a little bit for when the boss actually spawns. So we did kind of cut ourselves off there with some flame patches from the first intermission, so it is what it is. And as you can see here, the tank's getting ready to kind of leave. This guy's going to cast now for a while. You chain cast Violent Upheaval into a Seismic Rupture. So you just kill him during this cast or just after it, and then you're on Kurog again. Same deal here, between 4 and 5 seconds crossing over. I wait just after 5 seconds ticks. He sunderings me first before spawning the ad. That is the key here. If he ever spawns the ad before sundering you, you know that you did mess up, and you will have to change your timings accordingly to make sure that your raid is able to handle that harder overlap. But now that we're in the ice phase, it is kind of kill the boss or get killed by the enrage. Notably in this phase, because of that, you actually don't care about killing this dominator at all. So really you should only be hitting it to improve your Kurog specific DPS here. And for the ad, the actual biggest one here is that circle that you saw going around me there. That's the Icy Tempest. That will freeze you solid, aka stun you, for 10 seconds if you're ever away from a couple friendly players for 6 seconds at a time, which is why you see everyone here kind of grouped up for the most part, just so you don't have to deal with that mechanic at all. Where you can run into problems with it is right here specifically for the ad tank. The frontal here for this ad, as you can see pointing it over this way, and probably down, is that this is a nasty 75% slow, and as you can see, this overlaps with the very first Frigid Torrent, and so it becomes very, very difficult to both dodge and stay in range of allies to not be frozen solid when this actually goes out for the ad tank specifically. And so to get around that, recommend either using Freedom, Tiger's Lust, any of those kinds of abilities to help your tank who is tanking the ad here be able to actually freely move and stay in range of people. I think we had Tiger's List assigned to me here, but our monk was dead from the overlap and the intermission, so I end up freezing here because I'm just out of range. We moved a little bit far there, so I probably should have called for a freedom there, but just know that this can happen. That's the scariest overlap for the ad tank potentially getting frozen, just because they're so slow there. So make sure you definitely assign like a freedom or a Tiger's Lust or something like that to the ad tank there, just so they can actually move. From here, we're going to get the soaks in a little bit. In this case, we're doing this like the second intermission soak, so all the ranged and all the melee in one soak. Here come the soaks in a second here. There they are. So all the ranged and all the melee are going to be coming into these soaks here. Tanks aren't too concerned about getting into it because, of course, we have all these frontals. This Frostmite and the Sundering are going to come out around this. You don't want to do that at all. And you have more than enough players in these soaks to handle it, so don't worry about that. Just make sure that melee in one, range in the other, you should be good. And of course, like I mentioned, immunities can take these out. For the second set of soaks in this phase, it is a hard sack because, as you can see up here, the second set of soaks comes just before the enrage. So you actually don't want to risk anyone dying. You commit everyone into these soaks, send the next 2 soaks out to die. Then we get to the spooky overlap, and this is, which, as I mentioned, just like the Earth phase, is the second overlap of the boss and the add ability casting. In this case, it's those dodgeable orbs, and because you don't really care about cleaving onto this frost at all, the tank's goal here is to just get this add way the hell out to make dodging for the entire raid easier. And of course, that desync that we did at the beginning makes so these ads don't cast right away at the same time as the boss, so you have some time to actually move it out, but it is a very, very, very tight window because you basically have 6 seconds to get this boss, or mini boss rather, out, to jump back in to the group so you don't get frozen solid, and also you avoid the starting wave from Kurog himself. So what you see here is I think I move a second too soon. I think I should have waited about a second before I left. And then I have a second here. I could have reacted. I would have jumped. I would have to leap. So you have 1 second left before I would get frozen solid here. The goal would definitely be to leap in here on top of the stack so I don't get frozen. I wait a second too long. So yeah, if I had waited 1 second before moving this ad out, and as you can see, he is frigid torrenting way out here. So I did do my job. But I do end up dying here because I get frozen out here and I just get by all this torrents going out. Very, very tight timing, exceptionally tight timing. You pull the ad out and I was 1 second early, which leads to me basically getting frozen because I didn't quite have the timing to dodge these orbs. I do actually think I should have leaped anyways and just eaten an orb tick. That's probably definitely much better. So if you have to make that choice, don't do the choice I made. Make the choice to jump into the group and just eat 1 tick from these, because that can be dispelled, right? Whereas you can't dispel this 10-second stun. So that's definitely the better choice here to do. However, at this point in the fight, if this tank ends up dying for this, it's actually okay because you can one tank this boss from here on out because the Enrage is coming up before another Sundering Strike after this one will. So you're actually kind of fine in that sense. If a tank dies here, don't battle res them. Definitely battle res a DPS. Obviously, you have everyone alive besides the tank, then get the tank. But if you have to choose there, definitely battle res the DPSer at this point because, again, very, very tight check. We got 5%. We've got less than 20 seconds to kill this boss before the Enrage wipes us. From here on out, like I mentioned, it's just to burn the boss, kill him before you die to the Enrage, sacking the final 2 Stokes that are going to come out here in about 10 seconds. Hopefully, though, this guide did help you guys out, and if it did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more guide like it, including my Mythic Broodkeeper guide, which should be coming out pretty soon, and hopefully Mythic Razagath in the near future as well. I want to give a big shout out here to Gorebreaker and all of my other supporters over on Patreon. You get a bunch of cool perks for supporting me over there, including access to all of my weak auras and add-on profiles, all that good stuff, Mythic Plus ability spreadsheet that I'm working on, coaching, and other Discord specific perks as well. So check that out, linked in the description below. If you guys have any questions regarding this boss, leave those down in the comments below, or come stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics, where I stream all my Mythic progression and high keys from a tank's perspective, and I'll do my best to answer there. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.